Good day. Today is a special day, and it's because it is the first episode of our new podcast, a collaboration between myself and Joshi. ARCG Media and the Hoots podcast have combined, and we came up with something new for everyone, and it's called the Resilience Podcast. I'm sure a lot of you know what the word resilience means, or at least what you think it means. And if you don't know what it means, the good thing about this podcast is that we're going to always talk about resilience and help people who are dealing with certain things in life. So this is a podcast where we're going to talk about a lot of subjects. We're going to talk about, resilience. We're going to talk about love. We're going to talk about mental health. We're going to talk about success. We're going to talk about business. We're going to talk about humanity. We're going to talk about sports. Joshi and I are both sports fans. I'm a big baseball fan. I love the Yankees, being here from New York City. And we're both professional wrestling fans, but mainly, WWE. And Joshi and I met because of the WWE through a mutual friend. And, I've been listening to Josh's podcast episodes from the Hoots for the last few years. And I've actually been on the Hoots podcast a few times. Mm-hmm. And, when I decided that I wanted to create this podcast, I didn't know the name. I didn't know what I wanted to talk about, but I knew I wanted to do it with someone. So I reached out to Joshi a few months ago. Can't remember exactly when, probably sometime around November, maybe December. And I was in Philadelphia. I was actually in Philadelphia already, waiting for my ex-girlfriend to pick me up. And I was at a mall in City Center. And I reached out to Josh and I said, Josh, I have this idea. I want to bring this to life. And I've always told you in the past that if I ever did something, I would like for you to be a part of it. And, the beautiful thing about it was Joshi said yes. And then we talked about it and talked about it and talked about it. And man, I'm still on a high because right now I'm still reflecting on WrestleMania weekend, which was last weekend. And also kind of going through some personal stuff. I recently went through a breakup with someone who I really, really cared about and someone who I actually thought I had a future with, or I don't know if I still have a future with this person. Only time will tell, right? But I eventually want to share my story with everyone and hear how people are dealing with similar situations and whatnot. But before we get into any of that, I just want to introduce myself to everyone. My name is Rob Aurelius. I am from Brooklyn, New York, and I have a media agency called ARCG Media. We've been around for 11 years, and I love what I do. I get to travel. I get to help people with marketing, promotions, advertising, social media, branding, entertainment, sports, consulting, and WWE falls into that category. So I've been working closely with the WWE over the last few years, going to their shows, connecting with people that love professional wrestling, that love the WWE. I've even done a lot of volunteer work for the WWE community, and I'm very big with the WWE community, for things like breast cancer, Connor's Cure, the Special Olympics. And, that's how I met Joshi, like I mentioned before. And, ARCG has been my baby for the last 11 years. It's been a ride. There's been some ups. There's been some downs. There's been some good moments. There's been some bad moments. There's been moments where I made a lot of money. There's moments where I lost a lot of money. And that's just part of growing. That's just part of, being resilient. So now that I have told you guys who I am, I want to introduce you guys to my co-host, my partner in this podcast, one of the greatest people I've ever met, one of the most knowledgeable people I've ever met, and someone who I consider a brother and someone that I trust. Very special person, Joshi Lopez, all the way out in Chicago. Josh, what was yours?
Thank you, Rob. How's it going, everybody? My name is Joshua Adam Lopez, but you could call me Joshi if you like. I am a professional wrestling transcriptionist and a professional broadcaster based out of Chicago, Illinois. I've been part of the collective wrestling media for the better part of 10 years. Like Rob mentioned, I have a podcast called Hoots Podcast that we record each and every single Thursday. That's been around for 8 years. Actually, it's kind of ironic. 2 weeks from now, will be the 8th year anniversary of the podcast. I started it right after WrestleMania 32 in Dallas. And we have been having a lot of fun doing the Hoots podcast. It's very unique from standard professional wrestling based podcasts. And I talk a lot about life, mental health, a lot of topics that we're going to address on this podcast as the weeks go by. Also, on a side, off air, I make transcripts for professional wrestling television shows. Mainly now these days, I just cover strictly WWE television shows and premium live events. So I do Raw, SmackDown, and NXT every single week. And I share those transcripts on a site called WrestlingHeadlines.com, which you can check out. And also, if you want to see my other work, you can check those out at ProWrestlingTranscriptions.com. I met Rob about almost 3 years ago. It was a brief interaction at WrestleMania 37 in Tampa Bay, the first WrestleMania with fans coming out of that dreadful pandemic we all had to suffer through. Obviously, tease and piece everybody that suffered loss during that time period, obviously. But just to a mutual friend, we got to interact more as the years went on. Rob has been on the show a couple of times, and I gotta tell you what, man, this industry, especially the media world, can be very flaky with the people you link up with, who you collaborate with, and it's very rare to find people who are there for you when you need it, when it's not beneficial for something that has to do with your career, where people actually check up on you on how you're feeling. And I'm really big about my actions and my words and being there for somebody and not expecting something in return. You know what I mean? And that's one thing I appreciate the most about Rob. And I see a lot of myself in him. I feel like we have a lot in common. I think that's one of the great things that makes us brothers. And really a good time with this podcast is that we both have been very resilient in our line of work and what we've been doing for our careers, and also the mental hurdles that we've had to overcome. And for myself, I deal with self doubt. That's one of my battles that I had to deal with on a day in, day out basis. But this wasn't even a thing that I had to ponder whether I wanted to do this project or not. I would jump on it. It's something new. We're going to have a lot of fun with this, and I'm just grateful for the opportunity, Rob. I really am.
Glad to hear that, man. I look forward to this amazing journey because it's definitely going to be an amazing journey.
Yeah, so for those who are wondering, by the way, make sure to follow the podcast at The Resilient Pod. The Resilient Pod. Now, if you look for the podcast, it'll be anywhere you get your podcast from. So we can do a little tribute to Stone Cold here. We can find it on Spotify. What? Apple Podcasts. What? Stitcher. What? Pandora. Anywhere you get your podcast from. Type in the Resilience Podcast. It'll come to you free of charge. I think in the rollout, what we're going to do, since this is a new show, we're going to maybe do this maybe twice a month. Depending on our schedules, just to get our foot on the ground and let you guys get into the podcast. But I think, Rob, you could mention this. We were talking about this before we press the record button. I think as the weeks go by, so you guys get more content throughout the week, we're probably going to use a lot of our social media accounts, just like separate reels, shorts, clips from episodes. And Rob's going to talk a lot about his healing process that he's going through during this journey. And I'm going to be talking about something that I haven't really had a chance to express on my own podcast, which is my weight loss and more my life transformation journey that I've been on for the last 9 months. And it's gonna be special, man. We're gonna have a lot of fun with this. We're gonna have some guests as the weeks come by, and we'll let you guys know when that comes out. But Rob, I guess we should start here since letting people know who we are. Tell us about how you got started with ARCG Media and what is ARCG Media?
So ARCG Media started off as A&R Collective Group. It was named after myself and my old business partner, Rick, Rob Aurelius, and Ricky Royale. That's where you get the A&R. And, we always had a background in business. I had a background in marketing and promotions. I had worked with a lot of brands and companies on a freelance level. But Rick had just graduated from college and he wanted to be a film director. So he had a very creative side, and I had like the marketing, branding, and promotion side. And we were working for a business at the time called Old Souls entertainment firm based out here in New York. But the owners of the firm were from Japan. And we used to do a lot of events. And man, our events used to have a lot of people. I think one time, Josh, one of the events had like 3,000 people. It was
Right.
called the Essentia. And they used to do it every year. And it was sometimes at an art gallery in Soho, downtown New York. And man, like my anxiety was to the roof because I have social anxiety. Um, and you know, we had fun, but towards the end of that relationship with Old Souls Entertainment, Rick and I felt like we weren't being valued enough. These guys, being from Japan, they had a very different mindset, and cultural wise, they wanted to run the business very differently. And I kept explaining to them that the fact that the company was not based in Japan, the company was here in New York, in America. We There was things that I didn't mind keeping things cultural, but at the same time, we also had to adapt to the American way of life because the company was based here in America, and not everybody that came out to our events, not every client that we had was Japanese. They were from different places. So how do you accommodate them? How do you make everyone feel comfortable? And how do you, pretty much become a company, a brand that's for everyone?
Right.
So that's something that we would constantly discuss in meetings, and Rick would bring up his concepts and his ideas. I would bring up my concepts and my ideas. And, it got to a point, Josh, where they didn't really see our value anymore. And, that's something I'm going to talk about a lot on this podcast as the time goes by, is people not seeing your value, because I've definitely had that happen to me so many times in my life,
Right.
professionally, personally. It just keeps going on and on and on. And, it got to a point where Rick and I were like, either we don't know what we're talking about, or we do know what we're talking about, but maybe people just don't value us. So eventually, what we ended up doing, Josh, was Rick and I came up with the idea of starting our own company. I said, Rick, why don't we just start our own business? You have certain talents, you have certain, resources. I have certain talents, I have certain resources. Let's create something together. And Rick was like, I don't know, man. Like, it sounds good and all, but how do we start? And believe it or not, with no money, with no capital, with no anything, just pretty much our brains and our passion, we started ARCG. Um, Unfortunately, Rick and I did not last long. Rick took a different direction, a different route with stuff. And, I was sad that, him and I were not seeing eye to eye. And sometimes it's not easy to run a business with multiple people because everybody's got their own type of mindset. Everybody got their own
Right.
type of, everybody has their own intentions, and everybody has their own agenda. And my agenda and my intentions was to make ARCG one of the most powerful entertainment marketing firms ever, right? There's so many of these companies out there. And, to remain relevant, to remain on top always, you always have to adapt with everything that's going on in life. So, Rick moved on. I stood with ARCG. I kept running it. And then eventually I met my mentor, my wise man, if you want to say, Matty Rock. And, Matty is one of the greatest people I've ever met. I met Matty through a mutual friend, and you probably know who this guy is, Josh, former WWE superstar Gene Snitsky, which I do hope I can have him on this podcast someday. And I probably will. I'm sure I will. Well, I'm not going to say the word probably. I'm going to have Gene Snitsky on this podcast one day, and Gene can share the story of how we met. So, Gene was one of my first clients for ARCG. And one day I went to a WWE show, Monday Night Raw. It was actually, I think, my first ever Monday Night Raw. And it was here in Brooklyn and at the Barclays Center. And I remember posting photos of how great the event was. And Gene commented on my Facebook and said, "Oh, did you happen to see my friend out there, Matty
Yeah.
Rock?" And I was like, "No, I don't even know who Matty Rock is." And he was like, "Well, he was holding a big Gene Snitsky sign. How did you miss it?" And then somehow Matty found, I guess he had tagged Matty in the post. And Matty somehow found it to the comment section. and he posted a photo himself, and it was a big photo of me, like in section, I don't know, 200 something at the Barclays Center, and it was a big giant sign. It was a neon green sign that said
Right.
Team Snitsky on it. And Maddie had hashtag Team Snitsky on it, and Maddie had like a headband that also said Team Snitsky. So I said, "Wow, a walking billboard, advertising Team Snitsky." And Maddie reached out to me, man, and what I didn't know at the time turned out to be one of the greatest relationships that I've had so far. So ARCG's been around for 11 years. Maddie and I have been connected for 11 years. And Maddie reached out to me and said, if you ever need an office to work out from, give me a buzz. And at the time I was struggling to get an office space because I started working from like public libraries. I started working remotely from like Starbucks and stuff like that. And then eventually Rick and I were able through one of Rick's connections, actually through one of my connections, I'm sorry, because I met this guy named Ian who at the time was trying to produce a reality show. And I met someone through him named J.R. Rockefeller. And JR was able, after connecting with JR and networking with JR said to me, so you got a company, you got a business, and you need somewhere to run it from. So he said to me, well, I got a studio space in Brooklyn. So you can let your business partner know that I have this space and you guys are more than welcome to come and work out from it. But we have to find a way how we can make money together so that you guys can help me pay the rent at the studio space so that you guys can comfortably have access to it. So long story short, we had a little space, but we weren't really doing too much business. Business was so slow, and bills needed to be paid, rent needed to be paid, expenses were being made because Rick and I were constantly going to meetings. My suits are not cheap. Rick started wearing suits as well too, and we always had to get those suits dry cleaned. We always had to get those suits looking good and our shoes polished, and and also make sure that you look groomed. At the time I didn't have a beard. I have this beard now, but I was much skinnier at the time. And the beard, it was okay not to have a beard. But now that I've gained weight over the years, I feel like the beard kind of like helps my face look more
Right.
I shaved this beard off. I don't know what I'm gonna look like. But anyways, things just weren't really working out with JR. So it came to a point where JR was like, look, you guys are always more than welcome to use the space whenever you guys want. As long as you bring a client here, I could give you a percentage for using the space. But this is just how it's going to be. You probably won't have 24-hour access to the space, but whenever you have a client or a project and you present it to me and I think it makes sense, then I will definitely accommodate you guys.
Right.
So, Maddie didn't say any of those things to me. Maddie just said, if you need somewhere to work from, let me know. And so I reached out to Maddie right away and I said, listen, this is my situation. Where's your office located? And Maddie said to me, Midtown Manhattan, right? 37th Street and 9th Avenue. And, when I first went there and I met Maddie, again, little did I know that Maddie was going to be so significant in my life. And, I got emotional about it, talking about it, because last year, and you know this very well, Josh, ARCG celebrated 10 years.
Yep.
And in those 10 years, Josh, I've done a lot of stuff. There's been a lot of changes with me personally, my health, my weight, issues at home with my family. My parents are getting older. My mom's been through a lot of stuff. I lost my grandmother in 2019, the most important person in my life. Then I lost my uncle to diabetes in 2021, her son. And then I lost my aunt, which is my mom's sister. That was her brother, and that was her mother who died. My aunt passed away on the anniversary of my uncle passing away, which was October 10th. My aunt passed away October 10th, 2022. So it hasn't been easier, man. It's been really difficult for me. Sometimes people say things that seem easier said than done. And, most of the things I hear from people all the time is, you'll be going to be fine. This too shall pass. You'll get through it. You will be okay. And I say to people, it's good to hear that stuff. But sometimes, people just don't understand that everything we deal with is much different. And all of us have different coping mechanisms. I know people, and I'm pretty sure you and I equally know people that, unfortunately, some of their coping mechanisms was substance abuse. Some people's coping mechanisms was drinking, or doing certain things that she shouldn't be doing. And we've lost people in our lives. I've had friends that passed away from drug overdoses, car crash, from intoxication. We've lost friends to suicide.
Yeah.
And suicide is something very sensitive to me, and it should be sensitive to everybody else. This is why I work with Movember. Every November, I grow my beard out. What I do is on October 31st, I shave my beard, and then I grow it out in November, and I do it to raise money for charity, to help a brother, because people probably don't know this, but when they talk about the percentage of suicides in the world, mainly it's men that commit suicide. And we never know why we do it. We never really know their story. Sometimes people pass judgment and
Right.
say things like, "Oh, well, he was weak," or "He just didn't know how to handle life," or "He was just looking for an escape." And the thing is, suicide is real, man. It's not just men and women that do it; it's kids. Sometimes you hear stories about kids committing suicide. And the reason why I'm talking about this is because if I never had Maddie Rock in my life, I really don't know what I would have done. You know, my parents have not been the best in raising me. Um, I'm not going to sit here and say that they're not good parents because they've tried their very best. And I've gotten advice from both of them from time to time, especially now in my adult life. But I feel like there was a phase in my life, there was a point in my life that I needed that love, I needed that attention, I needed that guidance from them, and I didn't get it. So
Right.
unfortunately, the way I grew up, I had to get it from others. And Maddie is like the brother that I always wanted to have. And he is a brother to me because we don't have to be biologically related, but he is a brother to me. He's my wise man, my special counsel. He's been giving me so much advice. There's not a business deal or a business proposition or a business idea that I don't run through him. And most of the time, and Maddie's probably going to be like, "Hey, this is not fair to say that," but most of the time when I bring something up to his attention, Maddie shuts it down. I don't know if he shuts it down because he's been there, done that, or if he shuts it down because he just feels like it's not worthy. But I've listened to him. I've listened to him. Sometimes I've also gone against him. Sometimes I've tested my might. We're going to talk a lot about testing our mights in this with this podcast. And sometimes I burnt myself. And sometimes I got to hear the speech from him where he says, "Didn't I tell you to not do that? Didn't I tell you that that was not going to be worth it?" So I'll be honest with you. In the last 11 years, I've heard him say more that, "I told you so," than actually, "Hey, you did something good." And yesterday, Josh, I did something I thought I would never do. I wrote my first article for ARCG Media 11 years later. Article. And it was a post wrap up article, and I had an associate of mine, Keitra, who I truly, truly appreciate and admire. She's also been someone who's been very instrumental in my business life. Shout out to Keitra. She's all the way out in Texas, and she has a podcast herself called the SOB Podcast. And SOB, if you guys are wondering, it stands for Style of Business. And Keisha's written so many articles for me. She's actually written pretty much all my articles. And so, I reached out to her and I was like, "Listen, after WrestleMania is over, I'm going to need a post wrap up to talk about WrestleMania 40. And as time was going by, because I've been going through so much stuff recently, and, like you mentioned earlier, the self doubt, I've been trying to do things to test my might, to see what my abilities are. And I've never done a podcast before. This is the first time, so it's probably gonna have people kind of scratching their head a little bit. And I'm gonna learn as time goes by. And it's okay to admit, what you know and what you don't know. And I
Right.
hope that everyone that we invite to this podcast in the near future can say the same thing, that it's okay to not know things. You don't know it all. It's okay to not know it all.
Right.
We're human beings. There's ups and downs. There's goods and bads. There's pros and cons. The biggest thing about all of us is we all have flaws because we're all human. So I kept saying to myself, I want to do an article. I want to do an article because instead of just reaching out to multiple people and asking them to do an article for me, I could do an article for myself. It's my company. Why not create content? I'm already creating content for my company. Why not create more, right?
Right.
So why not start creating publications? So I created my first article. I sent it to Maddie. I sent it to Keitra. I sent it to you, and I sent it to a few people. And I got good feedback from it. before that, to promote WrestleMania, Carl, who works with ARCG Media, he's been with us since day one. And, Carl's one of those people that likes to work behind the scenes. And you barely hear from him and you barely see him online. But when he's online, he's pretty much just retweeting whatever I post or anybody else posts and kind of telling people that he loves what he sees.
Carl's the mensch. Carl's the mensch.
Yes, Carl's the mensch. So Carl, created the first ever article for ARCG Media. And I remember I shared it with you, and everybody thought it was coming from me, and it was actually Carl. And I even sent it to someone and it was a WWE article, and I even sent it to a guy named Keith Greenberg, who actually used to work for WWE Magazine. And I sent it to him, and I was like, Keith, what are your thoughts? And just to have Keith's blessing, it was amazing. When Carl posted this article, the article did great, and everybody was happy to see this article. And I told Carl, now you got to make a video. Now you got to go online and tell everybody. I'll do a tweet. I don't do videos. I don't do anything. I was like, Carl, people are gonna think you're like an AI character. You know what I'm saying? Like you got to go out there. You got to let people know what's up. You got to let people know that you're happy and thankful. So, anyways, Carl doing the article for us inspired me to do the article, and knowing that I was going to do this podcast, I said to myself, it's time that I start testing my mind. It's time that I start doing certain things. I was recently in a relationship. I recently, unfortunately, had to part ways with my ex-girlfriend, someone who I really, really cared about. And we broke up because she wants more for herself. She wants to kick off a good career for herself. And she feels that she needs to be alone to do that and whatnot. And normally, sometimes people say, hey, sometimes people go through certain things in life and they go through certain achievements and they want to have their significant other next to them. In this case, I don't think that's what she wanted. She wanted to do this all on her own. And, she said to me, listen, if it's meant to be, we'll find our way at some point. But when she spoke to me about her reasoning behind the breakup and everything else, she mentioned testing her might. She said, I was in the military, and the military taught me that. And ever since she spoke to me about that, it's something that I keep hearing in the back of my head: testing your might, testing your might. So I decided I'm going to start testing my might too. So I went and created my first article, and it was posted yesterday on ARCG's website. And if you guys want to see it, it's on arcg.com. I'm sorry, arcgmedia.com.
There you go.
Just go to the publication section, and you'll see the article where it says written by Rob Aurelius. And it was a post wrap up about WrestleMania. And I showed it to Maddie, and Maddie told me he was proud of me. I showed him the draft, and he was proud of me. And I used the photos that I used, just to play it safe. I used photos from two people that helped me do content for WrestleMania 40, which is Diego Serrano, shout out to him, and also to Nikki, all the way out in Tampa, Florida. Nikki's also a photographer as well too. So Diego and Nikki, I took them under my wing. I've been teaching them, what it is to be, a photographer on a business aspect, and not just like a regular photographer who shoots regular pictures and stuff. Someone who's actually come to a space of, business and events and whatnot. And, testing my might is something that I shared with them as well too. And I said, you guys got to test your might. So, getting back to Maddie has been very instrumental. Thanks to Maddie, I haven't gotten in trouble legally, knock on wood.
Right.
Sometimes there's always someone out there that wants to sue you for something, but I don't know where I would be in this world without Maddie. And I shared with Maddie, this situation about this breakup that I'm going through, and all the other stuff that I've been through in life. And Maddie's always been there for me. And Maddie's always said to me, "Listen, man, don't suffer in silence. If you need something, call me. Let's go to the bench. The bench is this sacred place out in Jersey that he likes to smoke cigars on, and especially when the weather's great. And the weather's going to get great now because it's springtime. And he always says to me, whenever you got to clear your head, whenever you got to talk about something, you don't want to talk on the phone, you don't want to text, just hit me up, tell me that you want to come to the bench, and we'll sit down, we'll have a few cigars." So, with that being said, Maddie's one of the greatest people I've ever had. I cherish Maddie today, tomorrow, forever. And, I hope that everyone can say that they have someone as instrumental in their life as Maddie Rock. So, I'm done putting Maddie over and praising Maddie. But yeah, ARCG, this is my nature. I like to help people. I like to put a smile on people's faces. I like to make people feel like a weight is off their shoulders. Sometimes, unfortunately, I like to deal with damage control. I like to fix things that break and show people how I fixed it. So that's why I've had so much success with the RCG, because I've done so much. I'm passionate. I love, making people feel good. I think one of the most important things in life, Josh, is making someone feel good and make someone feel happy. But also make sure you apply that to yourself. Make sure that
Right.
you're not just doing it for others, you're doing it for yourself. Make sure that you're making yourself happy, that you're doing things to make yourself feel good. And that's something that I was told by many people as of recent, something that my ex-girlfriend shared with me as well. Make sure that Rob is happy. Make sure that Rob does things to make himself feel good. And I'm going to apply that to myself, not just because of her, but because of all of the advice I've received from everyone in a lifetime. Sometimes I tend to get myself in trouble because I overextend and I do too much and I don't know my limits and I don't even set up my own boundaries. I just like to give, and provide, and that's cool and all. But reciprocation is also very important. You know, so I try to have that balance with my clients. I try to have that balance with everybody that I work with, business partners, associates, and whatnot. And I've had some ups and downs, but I've been learning. One of the things about me is don't handle things with anger. Don't handle things with like aggression and stuff like that. Sit down, talk to people. Have
Right.
a conversation with people. I'm going to say this loud and clear. I've always said this to people. Communication is a very big factor in life. I believe, and I stand on this, and I always will, that one of the biggest problems in the world is lack of communication. If we as humans communicated better, we would have less wars, we would have less fights, we would have less drama, less chaos, and less people angry at each other and
Right.
in conflict. The minute we start communicating more, you know, and it could be as simple as two countries coming together or two different type of cultures, like Ukraine and Russia, what they're dealing with, coming together. Because technically they're kind of the same people. They kind of have the same backgrounds. They were just divided because of politics and whatnot. If Russians and Ukrainians were able to get together and sit down and talk and smoke the peace pipe, then maybe they can overall, it's all about being on the same page. Being on the same page is very
Right.
important, Josh. As long as you're on the same page with people, I think things will get better and things will be good for you always. So that's just how I feel about everything. That's my perspective. And that's what I try to implement with ARCG. And aside from ARCG, there's a lot of things I like to do. I'm very passionate about charity. My grandmother always taught me that no matter where you come from, you always have to give back. No, and for each time you become successful in something, and for each time that you succeed in a level in life, it's always imperative to give back. And that's what I like to do. I like to teach youth. I like to teach others. I like to educate people. Again, it goes back to us having flaws. A lot of us don't know everything. And all it takes is for you to educate someone. If you don't know, for example, if you don't know how to do a podcast, just sit down and align yourself with people that have podcast experience and learn from them. And if they're willing to teach you, great, because some people don't want to teach people. Some people get to a level of success and get really greedy and forget about the fact that they're even human to begin with. But I do appreciate those people that go far and actually give back. Maddie's been giving back for years. Maddie does a lot of events throughout the years. There's one particular event that Maddie does, and it's called Cigar for Warriors. And
Right.
what they end up doing is they raise up a lot of money and they give it to the veterans that didn't get the things that they were promised from the military. And it's beautiful. It's a really beautiful thing. And that's things. Those are things that I like. Those are things that I want to do. I'm very big with philanthropy. I'm very big with giving back. I'm very big with educating people because I think the more we educate people, the more people will do right and do better
Right.
things. Unfortunately, and you being from Chicago, me being from New York, look at how the laws are in most places. Look how these things happen and why there's so much crime. I feel like there's so much crime out there, Josh, because most people don't know what's going on, and most people are being told that they cannot get the same rights that most people do, and
Yeah.
that they can't get the same resources. And when people feel like they're being alienated, and when people feel like they're being treated differently, they start acting differently. They start kind of acting like savages. So my whole agenda in life, my whole purpose in life, and I was recently asked, what is my why? My why, my purpose being here on earth is to make my grandmother smile in heaven, make God proud of me and everyone that believes in me, every single person that believes in me, because I know there's people out there that don't. But for every person that believes in me, I want to make you guys happy. But most importantly, I want to make myself happy. So with that being said, I'm gonna do what's right always. I'm
Right.
gonna be fair to people. I'm not gonna be biased about anything. I'm not gonna get in the middle of stuff and choose sides. If you and someone else that I know are going through something, I'm gonna listen to both stories, both sides of the stories, and try to find a way to find a resolution. Try to find a way to find, some type of, you know, a way for us to get back on the same page. Life
Right.
is short, man. There's too many people dying all the time. And sometimes we don't get a chance, Josh, to say goodbye to someone. We don't get a chance to apologize to somebody. I've been in situations where I've argued with someone, and maybe the last thing I said to them was something mean. And then the next thing you know, the next time I hear about them, they died or they're in a coma or something tragically happened to them. They lost a family member, they lost someone. And
Right.
now I want to reach out to them or I want to reach out to their family because of what happened, and I can't because we're not even on speaking terms. In life, try not to be on bad terms with people no matter what.
Right.
Even if it's someone that pisses you off, even if it's someone that hurts you, try to be on good terms with them. You don't have to talk to them. You don't have to have any type of respect for them. But just, be at peace with yourself in life. And I promise you that things will get better for you. You'll breathe better. You'll sleep better. You'll feel better overall. You know what I'm saying? So please, that's one of my words of advice to everyone listening to this podcast. Try to always be on good terms with everyone, no matter what.
Yeah, brother. Those are very powerful models to live by. You express a lot of powerful things that are not addressed enough these days. I think a lot of people like to have surface levels conversations because they can't really handle some really deep dialogue. And when I look back on my career with the podcast I do, I really try to bring, let's say, a back porch conversation. Let's say like we're at a family gathering or something like that, and you have a back porch, and it's like, I don't know, like 11 o'clock at night, right? And you're chilling. I'm straight edge, so I'm probably drinking water or Gatorade, and maybe you have some Terramana or something, or God knows what, But you have those deep, serious conversations, about life, and it's. I think it's difficult for some people because a lot of people can't handle accountability and can't have those like serious dialogue. To piggyback this back to resilience and kind of like our backgrounds and what we do, I think for me, really one thing that I really pinpoint the most when it comes to resilience is being able to adapt. And for me, that's really one thing that's kept me strong within my career because my realm of working in the wrestling media is it's not guaranteed. It's not linear to have a success when it comes to working in the wrestling media. There's a lot of politics that's attached to it. There's a lot of shady people that are attached with the wrestling media world, and unfortunately, you had to take stock of what you can control and adapt to what comes at you. So here's a little story for everybody that doesn't know about me. This time last year, I was furloughed from my previous job, and I was out of work for 6 months. And I've worked now for 3 to 4 different wrestling websites in the last 10 years that I've been doing these type of play-by-play articles. And what I've realized is that I don't give myself enough credit for the amount of times I've been able to adapt over things that I don't have control over. There's times where I've had my articles do so well that people that own sites had issues with the amount of viewership that I was getting because it wasn't the numbers that they were getting for the agenda that they wanted to push for the site wasn't getting what I was drawing in for my articles, basically, Rob. So, we're talking about wrestlers and stuff, and one of the wrestlers that really defines resilience in my eyes is Joe Anoa'i, Roman Reigns. and he has a line that says "Acknowledge me." And it's very powerful. Now, in wrestling jargon, he wants people basically to kiss his ass and acknowledge him and stuff like that. But I take it in a different way, and I talked about this on the show this past week, Rob. Acknowledge me is something that I had to realize for myself when dealing with self doubt and realizing what to do when I'm at rock bottom professionally or personally. And, you know, there's something else I haven't shared with people on air. I was born partially deaf. I couldn't hear very well for the first 2 years of my life. I had three different sets of Bluetooths down both of my ears growing up. I went through speech classes after speech classes. I had special education to like I think I was in second grade until I got back to a normal state. But yeah, to really adaptability is really something that's kept me whole and being resilient through any time I started doubting myself, wondering what the future was going to look like for me, especially in this situation last year because I I felt like I was on the right path. I feel like I was getting ready to take things to the next level. We got a chance to hang out with each other in Dallas, and I was really on my grind. I was spending almost 60 to 70 hours a week covering all the different wrestling promotions around the world. And I was really busting my ass with a lot of the shows and articles I was doing. And that's the thing about life. It's going to throw you curveballs when you least expect it. So not only do I get furloughed, a month later, I lost my apartment. So my uncle's a real estate agent here, decided that he wanted to sell the house that I was living in at the time, my first apartment, because he's building a property in Florida. You know, out of my control. I get it. That's something you want to do. I don't hold any resentment towards my uncle Noel for that. You know, I understand it, but it's I felt robbed last year that I was getting punched in the face one right after another. You know what I mean? And I really hit rock bottom, and it was an eye opener for me. I'm like, am I gonna give up on myself? Is this it? Did I make the mistake of going into the broadcasting realm and maybe I should have pursued music more? Like I had a lot of different thoughts of what I should have done. And really what helped me really start things moving forward and being able to adapt was watching the Last Dance documentary from Michael Jordan that's on Netflix. If you guys haven't watched it, go check it out. Obviously, I'm biased from Chicago. Michael Jordan is one of my personal idols, but understanding the ability to adapt and like acknowledging yourself before expecting people to acknowledge you. And that's why I try to bring this back to full circle. It really doesn't matter what people say to you. It doesn't matter what people throw at you. You have the power and control to adapt and push through what comes your way. And really, it was a really eye-opening message from God in a lot of ways. Now that I have time to reflect on this past year, and that I needed that time to rebuild and change the way I was looking at my life. I started on a weight loss journey at the end of May. Since that time in May, I've lost 110 pounds.
That's incredible.
Uh,
Congratulations.
and I appreciate that, brother. And back in October, I got my job back. So I was out of work for about 6 to 7 months, and I just came off the heels of covering WrestleMania 40. The podcast now is over 1 million downloads, and this past week's episode was the highest rated episode that I ever did for the podcast in the last 8 years.
Amazing, man.
And look, man, I am not look at me type of person. I am not a clout chaser to a fault. I may be more humble than I need to be at times. But for the fact of somebody like myself that doesn't have a blue check mark and all these clout chasers following every single thing I post and retweet every single day, like I'm about my actions and just being who I am. I'm not here to impress anybody. I live it by a motto that Notorious B.I.G. said in one of his songs called "Sky's the Limit." It says, "Only make moves if your heart's in it," and that's really what's kept me whole because I've dealt kind of similar situations. Not the greatest upbringing when it comes to parenting, and really you have the power to control what you want out of your life. Obviously, God's going to help you along that way and steer you in the right direction, but you have that power. There's no excuse of you to not reach your goals if you have the power to acknowledge that. And really, when I think about resilience, man, it's really when you hit rock bottom and ask yourself, all right, here's a real life test. What are you going to do about it? You know what I mean? So when I think about that's the great thing about this podcast now. Like we have a lot of things that we've overcome that we haven't even shared yet, and I'm very grateful to have something like this because it's something different. It's something that's real, and there's gonna be times where we're gonna have uncomfortable conversations, and it's gonna struck a nerve with some people, and it's okay. I want people to take away from this episode that it's okay to be vulnerable and it's okay to acknowledge the fact that you need to work on yourself too. So, by the way, folks, this little thing that pros do in the realm of podcasting. This is our pilot episode of the Resilience Podcast. Make sure to follow the podcast on X at the Resilient Pod. That's Resilient Pod, RELSILINT Pod. Pretty simple ordeal there. Make sure to follow Rob at Twitter at Rob Aurelius, also at ARCG Media. I'm at the Hoots Podcast on X if you guys want to follow my work as well. There, really quick before we bring this into the bottom end of this episode, I want to ask everybody that's listening to this right now. Let us know. Hit us up. Reach out to Rob. Reach out to me throughout the weekend, throughout the week. Let us know, what does resilience mean to you and how you go about it in your professional and personal life. So, Rob, there's something you said earlier that really caught my eye and really struck a chord with me. You said that you deal with social anxiety, and I wanted to know how you navigate that, even the fact that you've been successful with this for 10 years. Because I'm coming out of a situationship with my ex partner that also dealt with social anxiety. How you go about it?
Well, before we get into that, just wanted to let you guys know that the Resilience Podcast is also on Instagram as well at the Resilient Pod. So you can follow us on Instagram. You can follow us on Twitter. You could also follow ARCG Media on Facebook, and you will be posting stuff about the podcast on the Facebook. And even though Joshi did mention earlier the platforms that you can listen to the podcast on, also know that you could also go to our website, arcgmedia.com/resilience podcast, and you'll be able to listen to the podcast from there. When it comes to social anxiety, it took me a long time to know why I have it. I used to go crazy all the time. I used to be like, why am I nervous? Why am I shaking? Why am I overwhelmed? You know, and eventually, through my therapy, because I have been in therapy sessions, I've had different therapists throughout the years because my first therapist, I moved on from her because I needed to find somebody a little bit more challenging and a little bit younger because she was, getting up in age. And then I found this new therapist, and the new therapist got promoted. So she passed me on to another therapist. So I've had 3 therapists in the last, I want to say 6-7 years, probably a little more than that. And I started therapy because my grandmother was in the hospital. I had just, actually, my grandmother was in the hospital, but I was recovering from a previous breakup, a
Right.
breakup, which to me was one of the worst breakups I've ever had in my life. I was with this girl for 2 years, and I lived with her. She was the first person that got me out of my mom's house, and I lived with her in a beautiful apartment in Manhattan. And then, we were having issues, and next thing you know, we broke up. I had to move back home to my family. She moved back home to her family. She moved on. I moved on. But the way things ended, especially after the relationship, really affected me. And for the very longest time, I always used to hear people kind of tell me who I was and what I was doing to them and what was wrong and what not.
Right.
And I didn't know what accountability was. I didn't know what it was to not be in denial. And once I learned that I was in denial about a lot of things, I said, you know what? Let me start speaking to a therapist. And through therapy, I was able to realize who I was as a person and what things I was doing, and that I wasn't always right about everything, and that even if I felt a certain way, it wasn't okay. It was valid, but at the same time, I had to be considerate and also take accountability for how I've made other people feel. So through this navigation of therapy, I learned a lot about myself. I learned about my social anxiety. I learned about my anger issues, which is something I knew about from a long time ago because I used to have a lot of anger, possess a lot of anger when I was younger. I used to go to kickboxing classes just to channel some of that anger. I also realized that had the tendency of gaslighting people, that I was manipulating people, and I only did that because I guess it's something that whatever we see going on at home, we
Yeah.
grow up and we replicate that. And then finally, when it got to the anxiety part, I realized that I wasn't okay with being in the room with a lot of people. I realized that the busy streets of New York City, where I live in, I couldn't really hang. I would freak out, and it doesn't help that since 9/11, New Yorkers have PTSD because of what happened.
Right.
you know, I just always had some type of fear of just being around too many people, of what could happen. Somebody might do something. And then I found out that it was social anxiety. I couldn't really go to gatherings as much. I was doing networking events when I started ARCG. I mean, even before I started ARCG, I was doing networking events. And when I started ARCG, because of the experience with Old Souls Entertainment, I started doing networking events through ARCG. But
Right.
then I realized I couldn't be in the room half of the time with my guests. Not all of them.
Yeah.
And especially if five people were trying to get my attention all at once, like, hey, Rob, great event. Hey, Rob, thank you for having me here. I could only listen to like one or two people at a time. You know what I'm saying? My attention span was crazy. And then when I realized, when it stemmed down to, oh, maybe you just have social anxiety, I said to myself, is that what it is? Is that why I get overwhelmed? Is that why I get angry? Because social anxiety works very different. Sometimes you can just get really overwhelmed and isolate yourself. And sometimes you can get so overwhelmed that it can become, you can start getting angry. And now you're getting a little pissy, and now you're getting a little nasty towards people. And now you're kind of like, in a bad mood. And, you're going to make certain remarks towards people or comments that are not like the most appropriate. And the best thing I ever did, Josh, and this doesn't work for everybody, but I encourage people to try it out. People started telling me, and I laugh about this because I think you know where I'm going with this. People said to me, "Listen, man, smoke weed. Smoke marijuana. It's gonna help. It's gonna help with the anxiety." And I'm like, "Nah, man. I've never really been someone that likes that smell, and I don't think it's for me. And I don't think it's my cup of tea. I like to smoke cigars."
Right.
Mainly because of the leisure, the lifestyle of it. And cigars are technically muscle relaxers, so they kind of like help you just lay out and chill and mellow. And it's like my winding down stuff. So I possess a lot of energy throughout the day. When I first wake up in the morning, Josh, I have so much freaking adrenaline, so much energy. I don't know where the hell it comes from. I guess it's from being able to rest and then waking up and having that adrenaline. But then by the time the late afternoon, evening comes, Rob's already, kind of like tired, exhausted.
Mhm.
And that's where sometimes I just like to grab a cigar and just relax. So I had to, because of therapy, and thank God for therapy, I was able to speak to my therapist about this. And I said, well, what can I do? And here's what they wanted me to do. They wanted me to start taking medication. And Josh, I respect medication. I appreciate that it exists because in this world, some people need it.
Yeah.
Not everyone needs to be on medication. And if you don't need to be on medication, try not to be on medication. No disrespect to anyone that needs it. But if you don't need it, don't
Don't. Right.
use it, So I did my research. And then one day I'm over here talking about, like, I don't know, man, I don't want to give this marijuana thing a go. And then as I'm doing research on marijuana, I find out about CBD. And Josh, CBD's been around for years. But I found out about CBD for the first time probably a little less than 10 years ago. And when I found out about it, I tried it. And I remember when I first tried CBD, I think I was really calm, cool, and collective. And I was like, whoa, I don't like the effects of this. But then I was like, if I find the right CBD, it
Yeah.
might help. So here's the thing about Rob. Rob likes to always put people over. Putting people over is a term in wrestling that, for those of you that do know and those of you that don't know, putting people over means pretty much like, giving someone credit or giving them a shout out, you know? So I like to put people over, and I do it because I am Rob Aurelius, but Rob Aurelius would not be Rob Aurelius if it wasn't for the people that I surround myself with. And I'm about to give a shout out to someone, and his name is Victor Melgar. Victor's all the way out in California. And Victor has his own CBD brand that he created a few years ago. And believe this, Josh, Victor's under 30, and
Oh
he's
wow.
one of the most successful people in the world. And actually, when he created this brand, it was during the pandemic, and that's how I met him. I met him through the power of networking. I love networking, man. Networking has always worked for me. And Victor had to be 21, 22 years old when he started this, right? And he had a product. I told him that me being a brand ambassador, I would love to promote it. I would love to get people to try it. And let me tell you something, Josh. It's the only CBD that I've had in my life that has no aftertaste. Sometimes people say they get that very weird aftertaste, that marijuana taste, or just a weird medicine taste and not the good type of taste, from medicine.
Yeah.
This doesn't have a bad taste at all. Full spectrum. And what I love about Victor's product, it's called Nala Health, is that Nala CBD is that, he can also alter it a little bit, so, he could give you a certain dosage that maybe certain companies don't. Certain companies go by standards. So it's either like 250 milligrams, 500 milligrams, 750, 1,000. Victor could give you what you need, but he does it the right way. He does an assessment where you go on his website, nalahealth.com. You fill out, what your symptoms are, what you're dealing with, insomnia, anxiety, depression, whatever the case may be. And when I started using that product started helping me. And I started going to WWE shows because that's another thing. When people would say, "Well, how do you have social anxiety?" and you go to concerts and you go to WWE shows, I say to people, it's not how you think it is. I'm not in the crowd at a concert. Most of the time in a concert, I'm actually in a suite with probably a few people, and I don't have to deal with the pushing and the shoving of a crowd. And it's the same thing with WWE. With what I do with WWE gives me comp tickets or sometimes gives me credentials to go to their shows. And what I do is I stay in a suite or I stay in a media box or something or a loft or a clubhouse for that matter. And what I do is I just do my media coverage through social media, and I take some CBD with me before every event, and it keeps me calm. It keeps me
Right.
calm. And at the end of the day, it's okay to go out and have fun. And sometimes we're scared because we may have PTSD or we may have social anxiety, but it's okay to go outside and have fun. Don't think the worst of things always. Try to go out there and have fun. I just came from WrestleMania weekend last weekend, and guys, it was the greatest WrestleMania of all time because I got to see The Rock finally wrestle. I've never seen The Rock wrestle before, and I also got the chance to see Cody Rhodes finish the story. We'll talk about that soon. Because I love Cody Rhodes. And he's also someone who knows a little bit about resilience. But Josh, CBD has helped me so much. But here's the thing: it's not just about social anxiety. It's helped me with joint pain. It's helped me with my asthma. It's helped me with I had a few injuries growing up. I had a fractured kneecap. I had a bad neck. I've had bad posture my entire life, and it's helped me. It's really helped me. So, like I said, it's not for everybody, but I do want to say in a friendly way that if you guys haven't tried it out, give it a try. Try out Victor's product,
Right.
nowhealth.com. As a matter of fact, I think if you go to the website and use my code ARCG10, you get 10% off your first purchase.
There you go.
Um, this is our first podcast episode. Like you said, this is our this is just the very beginning of everything. So who knows? Maybe we might have Mental Health as a sponsor someday. Hint, hint. But yeah, man. With social anxiety, folks, try to meditate, try to work out, drink a lot of water, protect your peace. And sometimes that helps. You'll be surprised how many people we know even celebrities that have and deal with social anxiety,
Yeah.
especially professional wrestlers. Going out to the ring, Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson was one of the greatest. I don't want to say one of the greatest. Michael Jackson was the greatest entertainer ever. And
Yes.
Michael Jackson dealt with social anxiety. You could see it in the videos and pictures. He's always wearing sunglasses. He would wear the sunglasses because he was scared to, to to let people know that he was looking at them, or he was scared that all eyes were on him. But when he got on that stage, he was a boss. He was a legend. He was the king of pop. But social anxiety is real, just like depression and other things are real. Take take it serious.
Mm.
Make the necessary adjustments. And if anybody ever wants to reach out to me personally to talk to me about social anxiety, feel free to reach out to me. Reach out to me via Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, and we'll talk about it.
Very quick on this. Last thing I'll talk about the social anxiety. I want to know because you said earlier about communication is very very important, right? Especially in a professional setting, but also personal too. There's gonna be times we're gonna have some personal conversations, but I want to know from your experience with dealing with social anxiety, how you go about communicating with people, and then like what sets or doesn't set off your fight or flight responses. From my experience of interacting with people with social society, fight or flight's like a big thing where like if it starts going one here, you just completely isolate and you have to like run away and hide. Like how you go about it? Like is it difficult for you to have communications when you have to deal with that fight or flight stuff?
Here's the thing, Josh. It's like I mentioned before. It's everything is different for everyone.
Yeah.
How we deal with stuff is very different from everyone. Sometimes people say, "Oh, how come this person couldn't respond to me? How come this person?" It's common sense. I mean, I hate the word common sense. I know common sense is the thing.
Right.
Like life is life. There's 8 billion people in this world. You and I are very different, and there's a reason for that. I'm also different from my relatives. We may have the same chromosomes and makes us look alike, and we're related by blood, but we're different. We're different. And what I want to tell people, and this is from experience, I'm a big communicator. Sometimes I'm an over communicator. Not everyone's going to be able to do that. My last relationship was like that. My ex girlfriend, not to disrespect her, but she wasn't the best at communicating. And you know why? That's because it has a lot to do with her upbringing, where she came from. And in my family, I don't have the best communication from them either. So where did I learn to communicate? I learned it through frustration. I learned it through so many other things. And then once I learned that communication is important,
Yeah.
and again, it's about practicing what you preach. I can't tell you guys earlier, like I said, communication is one of the biggest problems in the world. Let's get better at it if I can't do it myself.
Right.
So to those people that have issues with stuff like that, it's okay to shut down. It's okay to isolate. It's okay to not have an answer for something. Because remember, everybody processes things differently. When I was with my ex girlfriend, there was times and periods of conversations I had with her where I would say a lot, or I would share something with her, and she wouldn't respond to me, and it would get me upset. But then I realized, maybe her processing system is very different from mine. So, what I advise someone who's having issues with possibly an answer or able to respond to something or do something at that very moment, try to tell that person, I'm not in the right headspace right now, or I can't communicate to you right now about something, or I don't have an answer for you right now. Please give me that space. Please give me that time. Folks, try to respect that. If
Right.
someone tells you, I can't talk right now, or I don't have an answer for that, don't get nasty with them. Don't be like, well, I need an answer now. That's being manipulative now. You know what I'm saying? Don't do that to people. Don't terrorize people. Don't antagonize people. Just respect them. Respect it. Because maybe you might be in that situation one day. You might be on the spot, or you may not be feeling your best mentally, emotionally. And you're going to want somebody to respect those boundaries and respect that you can't answer something right now. So, like I said, that's my advice. If you can't respond to something right now, if you can't process something, it's completely fine. Remember, our minds work like machines. Sometimes machines get tired and you have to turn it off. And that's how our brains are. Our brains are, it's a muscle. So sometimes the muscle needs rest. So it's completely fine. Please express that you're not feeling well and that you can't give an answer right now. And to the person on the other end, please respect where that person's coming from. That's my advice.
Now we're gonna do a little staple here. We don't have a name yet for this segment, but once we get closer towards the end of our episodes, we're gonna take time to give some wisdom that you could take towards the end of this journey here. But really quick, I'd be remiss. We are coming off the heels of WrestleMania 40. We can't go with the pilot episode without talking some wrestling. You were there in Philadelphia. I had a very busy weekend with the articles, also doing the NXT Stand and Deliver PLE as well. Really quick, how was the experience for you being there in Philadelphia, and what are you taking away from WrestleMania 40?
Um, Very sensitive topic, and I'll tell you why. So when I found out WrestleMania was going to be in Philly, one of the first things I said to myself was, "Great, I don't have to get on a plane. I take the Amtrak or a bus, and I'm in Philly." And I've done it before. And my ex-girlfriend lives in Philadelphia. And when I got with her, I told her we'd started dating in the summer. I told her about WrestleMania being in Philly, and I told her, I asked her, "Have you ever been to WrestleMania?" She says, "Nope." So I said, "Well, you're going to your first WrestleMania, and it's going to be the 40th anniversary." Unfortunately, we only dated for about 6 months. So by the time WrestleMania came around, her and I were already having issues. Well, WrestleMania season. When WrestleMania season started, which it starts in January, her and I were having some issues in January. We didn't officially break up till March, like I mentioned. And when I realized that I wasn't going to be able to take her to WrestleMania, it broke my heart. It broke my heart because it was something I was looking forward to. I wanted her to enter my world. I learned so much from her. She's a big K-pop fan. She's a big fan of, groups like, Stray Kids, BTS. And last year when I went to the Global Citizen Festival, which is an event that I do media for the last few years, there was K-pop people there. There was one of the guys from BTS, which is her favorite guy, Jungkook, and there was the Stray Kids, some of the Stray Kids guys, because some of them couldn't come to the States. And I was able to kind of see like what her world is about. So I wanted her to see what my world was about because she knows about WWE, she knows about certain things and whatnot, but she's still not like, all right, 40 years of WrestleMania. First one started in New York City, Madison Square Garden, and the 40th anniversary. The Rock was having a match. It was his first match in 8 years. Cody Rhodes was finally finishing the story. The story against dethroning the tribal chief Roman Reigns. So when we got closer to that, I was expecting that maybe I could be able to rekindle stuff with her. Maybe I could be able to convince her to come out to WrestleMania. But when I knew that she had no interest in being a part of it, mainly because we were not together anymore, it was very difficult for me. So I went out to Philly and I said to myself, it would be easier to go to WrestleMania and have fun if it wasn't in Philadelphia. She didn't live there. But because she lived there, I was a little kind of like on the fence and hurt about it. Every time I was in certain areas, for example, like the stadium itself, Eagles. When I first met my ex-girlfriend, she took me to Eagle Stadium to do a photo shoot for WrestleMania because
Right.
WrestleMania tickets actually went on sale August 18th last year, and I wanted to promote the on sale party, and I told her I needed to go to Eagle Stadium to take a picture in front of it, and she helped me with that. So, overall, I had a great time. I got to connect with some of my best friends, Mega Ran, my friend Justin, the Ballot Club guy, my friend Lee Meltzer, who's today's his birthday. Happy birthday, Lee.
Happy birthday.
He's turning 37. I wish you would have been there as well, Josh. I know we were trying to get you to come there, but unfortunately you weren't able to. But I was able to spend it with friends, and I was able to meet new people as well too. So overall, I had a very good time. But it was very difficult every time I turned around and something reminded me of her. Especially the spot where we met. We met in Center City, literally like a block away from the convention center. And every time I would walk by the convention center and look at that street, that corner of the street where I knew her car was parked at a year ago, it made me a little emotional. But overall, the experiences was great. I just wish that she was a part of it. And, I don't know if she ever is going to see this episode, if she does or she doesn't. But I'm only sharing this because, I want to be transparent about everything. And with this podcast, I want us to be transparent about everything. I want us to lay it all out on the table. I think that part of healing and part of, just feeling better about something is getting things off your chest,
Yeah.
getting that weight off your shoulders, and that's something I want to encourage everyone to do that listens to this podcast. So I had a great time. I got to see great matches. Becky Lynch and Rhea Ripley did their thing. We got to see Bayley, overcome her obstacles and show her side of resilience when she defeated Io Sky.
Right.
We got to see Damian Priest become the WWE World Champion, the World Heavyweight Champion. Rollins lost the belt. I'm a big fan of Rollins. And, Drew McIntyre had defeated Rollins, but then unfortunately, the Money in the Bank thing kicks in. And, that's the thing about Money in the Bank. When you're in the Money in the Bank winner, you can cash in at any time, any place. And what perfect way to cash in but at WrestleMania 40. So congratulations to Damian Priest, New York City man. Dude that I remember watching in the Indies, guy that I saw watching in Ring of Honor. And I kind of want to mention this because in the near future, if we ever decide to have him on the show, I want to bring up that story. But I remember I went to a Ring of Honor show, Josh, and I was doing media. I was a guest. Prince Nana invited me there. This is before AEW bought the company. And it was at it was at the Manhattan Center in Manhattan.
Okay.
A very historic building inside of the New York Hotel. And Corbin, the reason why I'm saying Corbin is because I'm about to say. And Damian Priest, I forget what his name was at the time, I think it was the Punisher, was having a match. And out of nowhere, people started chanting Baron Corbano. And I'm trying to understand why they're calling him Baron Corbano. And I guess at the time, Priest, he still, has his long hair. And he was a little thicker than what he is now. He's a little bit more slimmer these days. But I guess people were trying to reference him as a Spanish Baron Corbin because at the time Baron Corbin had long hair. And I guess some of the moves he was doing kind of looked like Baron Corbin. And I remember WrestleMania 37, when I met you in Tampa, Florida, Priest and I were actually in the lobby of the Marriott Hotel at the after party from night one of WrestleMania. And I remember looking at him and saying to him, man, I remember a few years ago I was in the crowd and I kept hearing people say to you, you was Baron Corbano, calling you the Spanish Baron Corbin. When you and Baron Corbin are nothing alike. But tonight you had a match with Bad Bunny as your tag team partner against The Miz and John Morrison. And you pretty much highlighted WrestleMania. Your match was a main event of itself. And I remember him looking at me and saying, I remember that. I remember people calling me Baron Corbano. And I was like, look at you now, man. You're your own person. I want to revisit that conversation with him eventually and be like, look at you now. You went from being called Baron Corbano to WWE World Heavyweight Championship. I think it's a beautiful thing, man.
Oh, it's definitely beautiful.
Epic.
It was history making, with Priest, first Puerto Rican WWE champion since Pedro Morales.
Yes.
Which is insane to think about. I just love how all the history tied into that moment too, because Punk was so synonymous with the Money in the Bank. Also, Seth Rollins was also the only other man to cash in the briefcase at a WrestleMania. So how all that tied in together to kick off the night 2 of WrestleMania 40 was insane. And then also another guy of resilience, Sami Zayn, beating Gunther for the Intercontinental Championship. Entertainment wise and story wise, for me, my favorite match that I transcribed is definitely Cody and Roman. That's one of the best matches I've ever watched and had a privilege to cover. But from a match standpoint in wrestling, for me, it was Sammy and Gunther. Just the whole storyline where Sammy was also dealing with self-doubt for what we were seeing on Raw and SmackDown every week to end up being the guy that ended the longest Intercontinental Championship reign of all time. If that's not resilience, I don't know what is.
It's not the first time that Sami Zayn deals with resilience,
Right. Also, shout out to R-Truth getting his first WrestleMania moment.
R-Truth, very funny guy, man, but he's got a good heart. I was able to actually shake his hand in Philly at the Marriott Hotel during the after party. I walked right up to him, and I don't normally call wrestlers by their real name, by their wrestling name sometimes, depending who they are. Some guys like to be called by their real name. Some guys like to be called by their stage name. And I went up to him and I was like, Mr. Ron Killings, congratulations. And I shook his hand and he was like, thanks, man, I appreciate it. R-Truth is a real legend, man. He's another Minch. You know what I'm saying? He's been around for so long. I mean, this guy's tenure with the WWE. I mean, how long has he been around with the WWE, Josh? It's been years, right? Over 2 decades.
Yeah, 1999.
Oh my God! It used to come out with that song, "Get Rowdy," and look at him now. He's R-Truth, man. Like, shout out to R-Truth, man. He's a great dude.
He's one of one, or as the kids say, a national treasure. On that note, though, we're gonna put a ribbon on the bow for this first edition of the Resilience Podcast. But before we get to the plugs and everything, Rob, is there any words of wisdom you want to share with our fun audience here for ARCG Media?
Before I share some words of wisdom, I wanted to let people know what I think resilience means to me.
Okay.
Since this is our first episode, resilience, to me, refers to the ability to successfully adapt to stresses. Okay, and maintaining psychological well-being in the face of adversity. Adversity is very important. It's the ability to bounce back. That's what makes resilience what it is. The ability to bounce back. You get knocked down, you get back up. And it's the ability to bounce back from difficult experiences. Resilience, to me, it's not a trait that people either have or don't have, but resilience is something beautiful. And once you learn what resilience is, and once you know how to deal with it, it's going to be beautiful. My word of wisdom today is something like I kind of told you guys before. Folks, never try to be on bad terms with anyone. Life is too short. Try to, be on good terms with. Don't try. Work hard to be on good terms with someone, no matter who it is. It could be an ex. It could be, an old friend, a relative, a family member, whatever the case may be. Try to be on good terms with everyone, because the way you're going to feel if you was to find out something happened to them, and vice versa, if they found out something happened to you and they're not able to say goodbye, they're not able to say I'm sorry, or they're not able to get past the situation with you and apologize and just bury the hatchet, it's something that you're probably going to regret. And in this life, we got to try to live our life with as many regrets, as many less regrets as possible. You know what I'm saying? So that's my word of wisdom to you guys today. Try to be good terms with everyone. Don't try to be enemies with anybody. Apologize, take accountability, and just love people. Love somebody today, tomorrow, every day of your life. Your audio is dead.
Sorry about that. My words of wisdom, and I share this a lot on my show, is be the authentic product that is yourself. It's very important. But also, for those who are dealing with healing situations, whether it's grief or coming out of relationships, one thing that's really helped me out through my process is having the ability to forgive myself for things that I'm not responsible for, and things that were out of my control from that situation and what hurts you. I think really what it comes due to really showing that you're healing is that the ability to forgive yourself, because you're gonna have good days, you're gonna have bad days. It's gonna mess with your head a lot, but the only way you can really move on is actually forgiving yourself, because so it's more times in these situations, it's not what you did, it's what the other person did, and that's not your burden to deal with anymore. So try forgiving yourself. I know that's hard for some people that are very prideful. I know that can be difficult at times, especially with people that have egos. But you have to forgive yourself sometimes. So that's my bit of wisdom for you guys this week. But Rob, before we head off, let everybody know where they can find the Resilience Podcast on social media and everything.
Yeah, so it's going to be everywhere. But like I said, we're on Instagram and we're on Twitter. We don't have an official Facebook page, but if you go to the ARCG Facebook account, the ARCG Media Facebook page, you'll see posts from the Resilient Podcast. But you could find us on Instagram, Twitter, at the Resilient Pod. So I know it's called the Resilience Podcast, but we ran, Twitter and Instagram already has the name, so that's why it's called the Resilient Pod. But also, if you go to arcgmedia.com/the Resilient Pod, you'll be able to find us there as well too. And you can find me, Rob Aurelius, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok at Rob Aurelius.
Ladies and gentlemen, you can follow yours truly at the Hoots Podcast. I drop a new episode every single Thursday where you get your podcast from. Also, you can follow me on Instagram at Josh Lopez Music, where I share a lot of guitar covers and show you a little different side of my personal life than just wrestling stuff. You can check out my transcript play-by-play articles at wrestlingheadlines.com in the results section. So that's for plugs. But brother, man, first one done, and it was a special time. This is probably one of my favorite conversations I've had with you so far. We covered a lot of ground for this first episode. I think we're in for a lot of fun as this journey goes on, but we're gonna have some guests in the coming months and stuff like that. But first one done, as Pat McAfee would say. But for Rob Aurelius, I'm Joshy. This has been episode 1 of the Resilience Podcast. Remember, folks, forgive yourself, love God, and keep it moving. We'll talk to you guys on the next episode. Peace.
All right, everyone. Have a great day. Peace.
Wait.
Oh.
Good.